Welcome to another live stream, my friends. Well, guys, Bitcoin has been seeing some very refreshing upside lately. And to be honest, I think the prices can actually go a little bit higher. I think it's absolutely possible at this point, maybe even retesting all-time highs. So with that, I just want to take a look at a few key levels that are on my radar currently. Let's start by looking at the 4-hour chart here, you guys. You guys know that I was quite vocal about this little triangle pattern that we have forming. But more importantly, where we got our retest earlier, about a week or two ago here. Well, what day was that? That was October the 17th, approximately, when we got into that juicy long position, and still have about 40% of that running because you guys, basically, I see potential for some short-term turbulence, absolutely. But the fact that we broke out of this consolidation range makes me think that we can test higher, because it just adds a little bit of confluence to the macro resistance level that I've been watching since getting this bounce, basically. I don't know for sure if we are going to make it up to those levels, but I am still holding on to my running positions, just kind of hoping that they end up getting there. Paying myself along the way, obviously, in case I'm wrong, just like usual. But I actually currently have 4 long positions open. I'm going to go into that in a little bit here. But this is the main one. This is my main swing long, which was shared in real time on my Telegram group, you guys. And basically the reasoning for that was just, as I was quite vocal about, we had this big wick. A lot of people are referring to it as a scam wick, but I like to think that that's actually a warning where the price is heading. And just kind of for a retest where the price is going to trend to. We never quite filled it, but came very close, and just pulling a fib how I normally would, we at least ended up getting to the start of my support pocket. Basically, we hit the 786, almost the 886 as well. But that's basically, long story short, that's why I got into that little position there. And yeah, we're basically going to have to see what happens from here. Because, guys, as I mentioned, if I were to look for resistance, I would basically be pulling a fib from our all-time highs up here, just because that is the current range that we're in. Ever since we got that massive capitulation, we obviously set our high here and our low was here. And since neither of those levels has been broken at this point, that is still very much the range that is in play. I've been quite vocal about the fact that entering any new positions as far as looking for a swing position at this point is very dangerous, you guys. That goes for the long side and the short side of things, because we are just trading in the very middle of a very large range. We're basically hugging the 0.5 fib. So basically smack dab right in the middle of that big range. So we're not really at macro support, nor are we at macro resistance. So we're just kind of in the middle, and that does make it difficult to find swing positions. So any positions that I any new ones at this point are always just scalps for at least the first half. And then if it can end up turning into a runner, fantastic. I actually notified my Telegram just approximately an hour ago or so, if that, that I also entered a new scalp, which I will get into in a second here. But yeah, guys, just looking at this, looking for a little bit of confluence. Like I said, if I was just looking for resistance, I would have my fib pulled from top to bottom, just like any typical resistance fib. So pulling from our highs down to our lows. And therefore you can see resistance if we end up getting up to the 786, like a typical range retest, that would put us closer to 120.8 thousand US dollars. But that resistance, that's just the start of macro resistance. The absolute top would actually be closer to 130K. And that would be looking for some sort of a swing fail type of setup, like the last 2 massive swings that we ended up getting, or the last 2 big rejections on our swings, I should say. So very open to that idea still, that if we end up going to all-time highs, it could just be another fake out a 3rd time in a row. That would absolutely devastate so many people in the market. But let's just look for little bits of confluence. I know I kind of went over this yesterday, but let's just look at this triangle. Where could we pull a measured move to from where we broke out from? Notice that that very much so lines up with approximately our all-time highs, just very slightly higher. But basically our all-time highs into that swing fail pocket. So there's a little additional confluence why I think that we could go a little bit higher, right? On top of that, let's bring up some liquidations just to find out where the liquidity in the market is. And notice that all of these gold yellow bars, that's all high leverage liquidation pockets. And notice where they stop is right around that all-time highs. So that measured move would actually grab all of that trapped short liquidity basically before, most likely at that point, as long as there's a whole bunch of liquidity forming below us. If I was a market maker, I'd be looking at grabbing that. So very possible that we basically end up pushing a little bit higher, grab this liquidity, and then form a whole bunch of liquidations below us as people, specifically retail, begins FOMO longing into resistance. That's where I think we would see a whole bunch of liquidity forming below us. And then I think that we would see that nasty rejection again, just like we did back here, right? We had a whole bunch of liquidity forming way below us. And although it happened a lot quicker than I thought it would, that move wasn't all too uncalled for. The violence of it, yes, absolutely. That was a surprise to everybody. But where we ended up going, that's kind of what I was expecting, other than it just happened a lot faster than expected. But at this point, we have to be cautious. As I mentioned, we're right in the middle of a big range, and this liquidity shows that, right? Let's actually remove all my drawings, and you can see that we have a ton of liquidity below us at this point, but we also still have a bunch above us. So again, the fact that we're in the middle of a range, we have that liquidity building on either side. So as far as swing positions, it's just risky to tell basically which way we're going to go from here. But I still am in the camp of believing that we could go a little bit higher, grab this, build more to the downside, and then see that real nasty rejection. But we're obviously going to have to see what happens. I still think that short term, we could see a little bit of a pullback, because even on this micro trend here, I'm going to get rid of my liquidations here. And I'm also going to get rid of these fibs just to clean things up a little bit. But notice where we have support on even the micro trend, right? It is still the 4 hour, but let's just say this swing that we started, this little pump to the upside, this is the last little bit of consolidation. That's the last little pause that we've had on this uptrend. And it's right where we ended up retesting that old resistance as new support on that triangle. So I love to see that we got that retest, but I would not be too surprised to end up seeing another retest of this. I would really like to see this triangle hold, flipping that resistance into support, just like it already did once. I would really like to see it hold, especially the fact that, like I said, we do technically have this little high and a slightly higher high that would confirm this as our higher low on the 4 hour, and just the immediate trend, really microanalyzing the structure basically at that point. But so just notice where that level lines up. Basically, let's make a little line here. We'll keep it purple because that's often what my bullish color is. But so let's just take a look at that structural point here. Notice lines up very close with that triangle retest. And as well, I want to bring up the trend master on the 4 hour and notice where that support is starting to get to. It's starting to be additional confluence at that level, that if we do see a little pullback, at least we're seeing both from just naked chart structure point of view, as well as some indicators starting to line up, just giving us that additional confluence for potential support if we do end up dumping a little bit further down. The weekly, I have mixed feelings about. I had talked about the fact that we may be getting this bullish swing fail, the fact that we ended up testing a little bit below my yellow box here, but holding it as a green candle and even closing it as such. Love to see that. Still really struggling with that order block that I've been mentioning, though. This red box here, just basically going from this block here and then retesting that old support. This is basically where the bulls were able to step back in and push us to new highs with our highest weekly candle close in history. This is basically where we found that support. So right now that we lost that order block and turning it into a breaker block, yeah, we got a little wick above it so far on the weekly candle, but we're still fighting with that. And I would still be quite concerned if we end up holding this weekly candle and closing below this box. I would take that quite seriously as a bearish bit of confluence there, that, hey, we're flipping support levels into resistance, which could be very bad for the macro trend. So something to be cautious of there. What else on the old 4 hour here? So yeah, unfortunately, even this buy signal, it is a lower buy signal. So if we end up losing that and seeing a lower sell signal come into the play on the MDX Trendmaster indicator, that would be a huge red flag to me that we aren't even able to get up to macro resistance for a retest, and the indicator resistance would be coming in a little bit even sooner in that case. So we'll have to see what happens there. As I mentioned, I am in several long positions. So one, obviously my main swing on Bitcoin, which was shared in the Telegram group, you guys. Those of you who are interested in trading based on charts, you want to see more examples of my favorite trading strategies, some of my trade setup ideas, more examples of how I use Fibonacci's, how I look at market structure. You just want more of my thoughts on the market in general. Do yourselves a favor, get in my Telegram by scanning the QR code or clicking the link in the description down below. As you can see, I also mentioned my Aster long, ended up calling that one out live as well. So two beautiful swing positions that have been playing out well that, were called out live in there. And as well, you guys, there is now also a free Discord where I share all of my posts from my private Telegram as well for full transparency. However, there will be about a 3-day delay on my posts, as this is a bit of a sneak peek into the Telegram. So there is a link down below in the description for that as well, my friends. And as I mentioned, I also opened another long position very recently. Basically, I don't have a ton of faith in this position, to be honest. It is a smaller one, but I was willing to take a third position on Bitcoin. I took this one the other day as a bit of a retest. Front ran it a little bit, but I had more laddered entries a little bit lower had we ended up dropping below this line a little bit. But I wanted to take another scalp just off the retest of this, basically. So got into a nice position there. But then also the one that's more recent and the one that I have a little bit less faith in, and I'm going to explain why in a second, but basically laddering into a position starting at my 886 here and going down towards my 115. Now, typically, guys, I would feel quite good about this position, even right now as we're trading lower here. But the reason I'm keeping this one a little bit smaller and being a little bit more cautious on this one is because this position technically has already played out once. Because after we had our higher high, this is our confirmed higher low, right? So that's where I have my fib pull. Notice that we already came down to my Stuber fib and filled it once, and we did hit that first target. We hit the 0.5 fib target already. Never quite hit that second target at the 214, but technically we did get our entries and we did get our first take profit here. I never did play that. So, but typically speaking, and I say this quite often on these streams, you guys, is that typically speaking, the market makers love to test those levels once at least. So often you end up getting that initial reaction off these levels, which is exactly what happened here. But since we already got that test once, it just becomes a little higher risk as we come down to these levels once again. But I do actually have one more order a little bit closer to my 115. That would bring my average entry down closer to 114.1K. And basically, if we lose 113.8, I will be out of that position. And I will actually be locking in this other position down here as well. The remaining 3/4 of this guy, I would lock in the rest of that as well. And in that case, I would only have my swing position running from 104,787 is my average on that guy from this swing back here. So that's kind of what I'm looking at there. I mean, right now, as far as tight risk management, it's very risky. It's obviously looking weak. However, the loss is very minimal compared to the potential size move if we do continue to the upside. Again, I have my concerns with that, so I'm keeping my risk management tight, keeping my position a little smaller than my others, but that's kind of my thought process there, you guys. Let me know in the chat, how are you guys all feeling about the market? Are you guys in any exciting trades? Are you kind of holding off right now? Are you bullish? Are you bearish? How do you feel about altcoins? All that sort of stuff, you guys. Let me know in the chat. And guys, if you do appreciate these live streams and trying to be the voice of reason in these crazy times in this chaotic market here. If you appreciate me keeping a level head and being the voice of reason, do me a favor, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, because it's obviously a very small channel since it's very new. And those likes and subscribes go a long way for the algorithm in this case. So yeah, like I said, this one, not a ton of faith in this, but we will see what happens. It's still either way for me. It's at least a buy level because we haven't lost the 115 yet, but it is looking a little bit weak, not going to lie. So with that, Aster, if we end up losing the 886, basically, I do have my stop loss in a bit of a profit on the rest of this position. I locked in a quarter of it at about 70%. And like I said, this was mentioned in the Telegram group, as well as my long position that I ended up playing, calling it right live when we were testing the 786, basically. So again, if that's something that interests you, do yourselves a favor, scan the QR code. Ooh, sneaky short from 115.8. Honestly, that is probably a good idea. 115.8, where would we have been? So up here. I think that I actually did notice that there was a little bit. Oh, no, never did have not even really a micro break. But yeah, I mean, if we zoom out, there is obviously some resistance here, right? I'm guessing you were looking at something like this, where you were looking at the resistance back here and playing this as a bit of a swing fail, in which case, yeah, absolutely see what you're going for there. And I couldn't agree more. I never did take the short, but that looks about, you said 115.8. So yeah, it looks to me like you got yourself into a nice little swing fail position. So love to see that. One thing that I did want to bring up is with the MDX retail indicator here is, first of all, on the daily, you guys, we still see, let's just give it a second to load here, but we still see retail shorts climbing at this point, right? So basically, as soon as retail shorts started climbing, you can look at the indicator down below where the red line starts climbing. That's where the price also starts climbing, because as retail starts shorting, that's kind of the fuel that we need for the upside. That's where market makers will push to the upside. So as we see, if we end up seeing that retail starts longing heavily again, that's where I will assume that we are going to Nuketown again. We are absolutely going to get devastated and hammered into the ground again. But so far, not looking too bad. I want to take a look at the hourly just to zoom in a little bit. And you can see that longs are technically starting to climb a little bit. So if this ends up basically curling to the upside, and so far it does look like that's going to be the case. If that's going to continue climbing, then I would assume that we are going to continue dumping. And, just looking at this on the weekly, as far as our high, higher low, we did technically lose this level as well. So in that case, if we see some sort of a retest up towards resistance and we see retail longs really stepping in, at that point, I will be looking for aggressive shorts once again. But as it stands right now, I kind of have mixed feelings about the market, to be honest. It's a little bit risky out there right now. Bitcoin dominance. This is one I haven't touched on this for a little while. Hasn't really done much since last time I talked about it. But basically, we did get that one bounce off of the daily Stuber on the Bitcoin dominance. We ended up getting right up to my 214 fib target very quickly. So at this point, I'm hoping to see this reverse to the downside. It's still early to say. This is still holding its buy trend. It's even a higher buy signal on the daily. If Bitcoin dominance continues to climb, I would expect that the whole market is basically going to continue trending to the downside. However, if we end up seeing a rejection at some point in the near future and seeing a lower sell signal come in on the MDX Trendmaster indicator, that would suggest to me that, people are willing to go into higher risk assets once again, start targeting altcoins, starting to trade those, starting to buy altcoins, FOMO into them and all that sort of stuff. If there's more risk in there, that'll look better for the market. And I would think that as if this ends up getting rejected and dropping, that's where we're going to see some very nice moves from the altcoins, just like we did when this was dropping in this range here. Altcoins were going nuts. I can't remember. I think it was July, August, and specifically September. I was trading a lot of altcoins to the upside. I haven't really been doing that recently because my focus has been on Bitcoin again until Bitcoin kind of makes more of a decision, I guess, for the midterm. But if this Bitcoin dominance starts dropping off and Bitcoin's just kind of ranging healthily, yeah, I'm going to start trading altcoins aggressively again. But for now, just kind of being a little bit patient on that. Let's just see some familiar faces in here. You guys love to see that. You guys keep coming back to these streams means that obviously, hopefully you're picking up some useful hints and tips and tricks, and you're enjoying my trade strategies and how I keep a level head looking at the market structure. If so, one more time, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Can I check gold on the 15-minute or the 1 hour? I absolutely can do that. Let's take a look at gold real quick. Let's take a look at you said the 15-minute and the 1 hour. So as far as the 15-minute goes, I actually want to remove those colors just so I can see it more clearly. So the thing with this is gold still looking not so great, in my opinion. I would love to say that there's potential support here because we have something like this. Notice we even tagged the 786 there. But one thing about this, guys, is we never did, even on the 15-minute here, we never broke a lower high, right? I would not consider this a lower high because we have not had a lower low since this. So at this point, basically on this trend, we have a low here, low here, lower high here. So we never even came close to breaking structure before getting that pullback to those fibs. And realistically, I shouldn't even consider that a low and that a lower low. It should more so be this is our low. This is my lower low. The highest point between the two is way up here. So resistance is still way above us for how I like to look at for market structure. So even if we end up getting some sort of a bounce, I would be looking for potential resistance on something like that, basically. And if I zoom out to the 1 hour, I have the exact same structure. That actually doesn't change at all. I still have this low, this lower low. This is my confirmed lower high. So yeah, as far as I can say about gold, the 1 hour, the 15-minute, basically any time frame, it looks like we broke an uptrend and we formed some very nasty structure to the downside. And until we end up breaking something there, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. Did catch that first test this morning, TP to quarter at the 214, then got out just in profit after a second lower sell signal on the TM. Oh, on the Trendmaster. I thought you tried to say what time frame there. Yeah, what is the Trendmaster? Okay, so that was probably this guy back here. So we're getting a bit of mixed signals on the Trendmaster on the 5-minute. It is looking weak to me. I think that I will get stopped out of this third Bitcoin position just because even the fact that we lost this buy signal here, that on its own, that's a sign of weakness at this point. So yeah, we'll have to see. But I still don't think the trend is ruined, though. Like I said, even if we pull back, like, yeah, the lower time frames, whatever, turbulence is to be expected. But as far as the actual trend, I'm really hoping to see us end up holding above 112K, basically. That would provide us with support from the retest of this triangle resistance support flip, as well as the 4-hour MDX Trendmaster. That would hopefully end up supporting us. If it doesn't, and we end up just dropping back into this triangle, it's very possible that we're just going to end up going right through it, and we're just going to have to see what happens in that case. Hopefully see the triangle end up holding as support, something like that. But at that point, if we have momentum, things could get a little bit dicey there. I think the market's in a very unique place right now. Honestly, as far as the midterm goes, I have very mixed feelings whether I think that we are going to test new all-time highs or if we are going to literally start a bear market. I mean, At this point, I'm happy to go either way. The fact that the weekly we have basically we're right at the 4-year cycle time frame, basically right at that 152 weeks. So yeah, it would be right on schedule if we did end up seeing, some structure breaking and start forming our downtrend. It would be right on schedule. But I'm also one of those guys who, just because it's happened before does not mean that we have to continue that fractal. Eventually patterns break. So if we end up just staircasing higher, we break through our all-time high resistance, we start staircasing higher, then yeah, I am all for an extended bull market. And I would love to see us go parabolic. I think that would be so much fun. It's just that at this point, we just have to give respect to resistance when we get there. If we end up climbing back to macro resistance, because we broke nasty structure. That's all there is to it. If this was our last higher high, this is our higher low. We obviously broke that level. So that's a nasty structure break. And it would be very natural to end up retesting the swing and then seeing some sort of a rejection. So that's just what I want to put on your radar. The fact that if we end up getting back up to resistance, just remember this: resistance is resistance until it's broken. And a lot of people were totally blindsided by this, even though I shared this short from 125.2K. I shared it live with you guys as well. And it was for no reason I wasn't even bearish at the time, right? I mentioned in my post that I was actually bullish, but I was taking that short to protect myself because it was such a tight invalidation, much like that lower time frame scalp that I was just talking about earlier. It's just the fact that we are closer. In this case, we were at resistance. So I treat resistance as a sell level, just like when we were down here, it was looking very weak. I wasn't even bullish, but a buy level is a buy level. So it is what it is. So with that being said, my friends, I think that's about all I wanted to go over today. Just wanted to throw a few important levels on your radar that I've been watching recently. Just a couple things to keep your eyes on, basically. And again, if you do appreciate these live streams, please do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And as I mentioned, if you're interested in trading based on charts, you want to see more examples of my favorite trading strategies, my trade setup ideas, how I pull fibs, market structure, and you just want more of my thoughts on the markets in general, do yourselves a favor, scan that QR code. Like I said, even back here, this is where I was talking about that short from our all-time highs and how it was apparently unpredictable, but we absolutely nailed that, grabbing a bunch of liquidity and going to the downside. So if these moves are blindsiding you and you just need a level head to look at the market structure a little bit, do yourselves a favor, get in there. And as I mentioned, if you do want a sneak peek with the 3-day delay on the signals, but I share every signal in there for full transparency, do yourselves a favor, get in the free Discord as well for a bit of a sneak peek there. And with that, thank you so much for being here with me once again, my friends. Seriously appreciate doing these live streams with you guys. And with that, I'm out. Stay safe, my friends.